Welcome to another edition of the Dementia Care Partner Talk Show. Now, here's dementia care expert Teepa and your host, Greg Phelps.
Hello and welcome to the Dementia Care Partners podcast. My name is Greg Phelps, and joining me as usual is Teepa Snow. The most difficult decisions that many will have to face or have faced is when to actually put someone into care. Are there hints you can offer, and are there some definite red flag areas that we need to stay away from? Is there a way to ease into the subject? Now, a personal note here, my father ended up having to put alarms on doors because my mom became a wanderer.
Mhm.
That's one. But are there things we can do, and then how do we assess that the time has actually come?
Yeah, and it's really important to note that for some people, the time will never come. No matter what happens, we'll figure something out because that's what works for us. But if the time is, so what are some signals? Well, for me, I look in the mirror at myself as a carer and I go, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Or I look at you as the person I'm supporting and say, I'm not liking a lot of what's going on. Or I listen to you and I realize you're not liking a lot of what's going on. And then what should happen in my world is we need to have a conversation with the third party because the two of us are recognizing, wow, I may recognize it more, you may recognize it more. Something's not working the way it used to for us. And it's time to look at what else we might need. And what I'd say is we need different support. The question becomes, do we need a new environment for that support, or do we just need to add some support in? Is the challenge time? Like how much time this is taking, and how much time you're on your own, and how much time? Or is it where? Like for your dad, like where he was didn't seem like where he should, mom should be. And so mom would try to go places where she thought she should be because, and that's the thing we got to figure out is what's the because? Because her brain was changing? Is it her brain changes? Or is it because when she looked at your dad looked like he didn't know what to do. And so she was going to go ask a neighbor what to do, or because she was fearful, or because, I mean, we need to learn more before we know how do you do and where do you do these transitions. Because if I'm an elopement risk at home, where I've lived there for a while, I'm familiar with the place, but now I'm not. What do you think will happen if you put me in a new place and lock a door with people I don't know and a program that I'm not familiar with, and and they don't know me? What do you think will be a possible, probable high risk situation, Greg?
Well, I see that one sort of as it could be a total setback. Like if we're here, it could be just all of a sudden you've gone to jail, directly to jail.
Yeah. So if I've never visited a place to see what it feels like and looks like to me, the person who has the brain change, um, do you think that's like, let's just surprise her and see what happens? Or, like, we'll just put her there and see what happens. I don't, I personally would not recommend that as a pattern. I would say, well, let's go see these places before we need these places. How about if we do that? Let's go check out and see what it looks like, see what this one, that one. If we ever got to a place where I was not able to care in the way that you and I both agreed on, let's take a look at a couple places and see what you think. We may not have that option, but I want to know what you think, even if I don't have that option. I want to know what you're thinking about it. What
Now
works for you, what doesn't.
you've got some F's that go into this somewhere, isn't it? Friendly, familiar.
Familiar, functional, forgiving. Yeah. And the right sensory match, the right space match, the right social match, and the right surfaces, even. Um, Looking at, do they have ramps? Have they got steps? Do they have locked doors? Am I allowed in and out of my room? Um, there's so many variables. And getting to know what the possibilities are before I need them would be super helpful rather than waiting to the moment where now I'm forced into a choice. Let's say you're at the hospital because you broke a hip and I'm not prepared because we have a two-story house. And these are the ones that are like, "Ooh, well, that was not on the agenda. I didn't think you're gonna break your hip, but you did. All right, now what? Because I can't get you up and down the steps. We can't where's your bat So now I have a surprise on my hands and I need crisis intervention, because I didn't get a chance or I didn't think about doing it. And that's where plan ahead and then take a break from the planning, but you've done a little planning, you've done some thinking, and then you can step back and go, we've done some of that. Um, and I've got some stuff that I can now go look at. We recommend even like checking out your community to see what's out there, even if you're not thinking I'll ever need this, I'll ever want it. It's like, I hear you. And yet stuff happens with dementia. It's a it's an interesting road that you never know where you're going to end up sometimes.
Well, we're in the world. There's some cars like the old Volkswagen Beetles, and then there's the big Cadillacs.
Yeah.
I've been to a couple of Cadillac places, but I still didn't like. I thought, wow, if only you spent some of that money on training.
Yeah. Because it's how it looks and then there's how do you live there? And what are the people there able to know about me and do with me and help me feel comfortable? How do you have this transition happen? What's the policy on transition? There are so many pieces, and I don't want to overwhelm people, but I want us to realize you're talking about changing everything essentially. And I will say that sometimes waiting too long for me to adjust to a change is not the right answer. And sometimes waiting until my world is so small is just the right way to allow me to transition. Because when my world gets really small, the small world that I'm in may be the best, safest, most secure place for me to be, but it may not. So we need to really process through this before we get there. The worst case scenario is when somebody's forced, whether it's the person who's making the choice or the person who's being placed, or the staff that are now being asked to do something they really are not necessarily trained or prepared to do. Do we need better? Yes. Do we have it now? Not always.
Gee, but before somebody makes that decision, obviously they should talk to somebody. Do you have somebody that's available? I know we can't do 24/7,
Right.
365 days a
Yeah, I
year.
mean, we can't do that. I mean, if it's an emergency crisis, you may have to go ahead and make a choice or you may call a pause and say, sometimes we recommend, pausing and saying, I know you want him out on Friday. Friday is the worst day for somebody to go into care situation that they've never been in. I'm going to say, absolutely not. We need to figure this out. This waited too long. I'm sorry they decided to do that. And realize you need help. You need a patient advocate in that moment. You don't need me. You need somebody emergently. But there are lots of situations where if you're starting to realize this is getting hard, that if you get up with us and do a complimentary conversation, we might be able to help you figure out what are some possibilities for you all to explore and for you to have in your in your back pocket when the time comes.
Deepa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Dementia Care Partners podcast. For more information on today's podcast or any other dementia related topics, go to teepasnow.com.